the session. Here we go. So today we were going to discuss only the beginning of the book. And I said to you, so please read the prologue to Hunger of Memory, Middle Class, Pastoral is the title. Prologue, just a few pages. At the same time, I said, go slowly because it will be challenging. It will give you a good number of challenges, and we'll do our best to go over those challenges today. But it's not an easy beginning. Okay, it's much easier to read the assignment for next class, which is area, the first chapter for the book Hunger of Memory. That's the assignment, right? Along with the forum. And beautifully, I saw today that we have already one posting. Let me see, where are we? Let's see if there is somebody trying to come in. No, it doesn't seem so far. Okay, so if I go to the forum and we take a look at it, I saw that Max already was being part of the posting. And he writes, hearing the labor pools that were enacted prompts me to think about exactly how rough it must have been to pick crops all day in the sun, knowing that this is the best chance at work you can get in a time like that. Knowing that the Mexican Americans were just, if not more driven to work than African Americans, breaks my heart. But following through the video, seeing someone rise to represent the Mexican Americans, even with the threat of the Texas Rangers, seeing John F. Kennedy rise to be someone whose Catholicism would work towards his popularity, something that had surprised me was how bad speaking Spanish in a school could be. We have certainly come a long way since then. To create Raza Unida is a huge step in history and makes me proud of my heritage of this overturn. That's why, that's what Max included, wrote in the forum already. So we need more comments. You know, we need some reply to Max. And of course, here you have the documentary Chicano. And let me explain again. Let me give you a reason for watching this video. Without this, it's impossible to understand the book Hunger of Memory, because Hunger of Memory is actually a letter to many Chicanos. He's writing, in my view, a letter, a response to many of the ideas presented in this moment of the history of Mexican Americans. And this moment include the Chicano movement. So if you don't understand what took place with this movement, what happened to this youth in the 60s, it's impossible to understand, to really understand what Richard Rodriguez is writing about, okay? So for that reason, I'm going to play a bit the Chicano documentary to begin the class today.
Soy de Texas, es mi orgullo ser chicano. En los barrios me pueden encontrar.
In the 1960s, Mexican Americans made up the majority of the population of South Texas. Most were migrant farm workers, poor, with little education. After picking the winter crops, many of them travel across America in search of yet another harvest.
this part of the country has been built on the backs of the Mexican Americans. So you had every bit as much segregation, unequal education, and so forth as the African American did in the Deep South.
The few wealthy landowners were Anglo. The huge majority of the population was locked into a labor pool of just reserve labor. Owners of businesses were all Anglos. I don't recall in the downtown area a single Mexican-American business when I was growing up.
In Crystal City, where Jose Angel Gutierrez grew up in the 1940s and 50s, Mexican Americans accounted for 85% of the population, but they had no political representation. For years, Mexican Americans have been denied the right to vote by obstacles like poll taxes, literacy tests, and gerrymandered voting districts.
You take a county where we might be the majority of the population. Well, what the Anglo establishment had done was to divide the county in such a way that it was simply impossible for Mexican Americans to really gain political power.
We had the poll tax back then. Most people did not have the money. And if they did, they had the sense not to spend it on the privilege of voting, because it was always white candidates, and that was always the results.
The situation was people were, in many cases, denied the right to vote because they didn't speak English. In other cases, they were in sort of peonage to a boss or patron and were required to vote as he wanted them to. He would pay the poll taxes, and they would vote for who he said to vote for. So it was really an archaic system.
We did work very hard. All 5 of us went house to house as
In 1963, for the first time in more than 100 years, Mexican Americans put up their own candidates for office and challenged Anglo politicians for control of city government.
We had to be ingenious and invented cakewalks and tamale sales and dances where you would pay supposedly for the cake or the tamales or the dance, but end up getting registered to vote.
Although only a student, Gutierrez was active in the campaign, making speeches, registering voters, organizing rallies. The 5 candidates known as Los Cinco surprised political observers by defeating the Anglo mayor and the All-Anglo City Council. The victors quickly learned that long-standing traditions do not change easily. First, Texas Ranger A.Y. Alley refused to turn over the keys to City Hall. A phone call from Texas Governor John Conley forced him to accept the new officials.
We decided we was going to try and put
The local business community was more effective in its strategy.
Didn't you lose your job just after the election results were announced? Yes, sir, I sure did.
Cut your salary, yes. In Sansing, I'm going to $35 a week. I don't know how long I could stand it, but I'm doing it right now.
They began trying to indict one of the members of the council for a check that had bounced. They tried to remove 1 or 2 others for being late in payments of utilities. And they ran a slate against us the next time around and beat us.
The rise and fall of Los Cinco echoed a long history of conflict between Mexican Americans and the South Texas power structure.
In the history of oppression of Mexicanos or Chicanos in the United States, Texas was probably the worst. You have more of a history of conflict. You have more of a history of land grabbing, outright land grabbing. You have more of a history of just outright physical oppression of the Mexican population in Texas. In fact, in the 1920s, the New York Times had an editorial that's saying that the indiscriminate killing of Mexicans in Texas had reached the proportions of being a scandal.
The Texas Rangers were created in 1823 to protect settlers from outlaws. They had a reputation for intimidation and violence toward Mexican Americans.
I was coming up Military Road with Colonel Hickok,
and they came to some big mesquite trees, and it was full of Mexicans hanging by the neck. The colonel says, "Peavy, I guess the Rangers have been through here."
In the face of this frontier justice, terrorized Mexican Americans were reluctant to fight for their civil rights.
Down there, law enforcement was used for private purposes. They were acting as a private police force for some of those farmers down there, employers down in the valley. This is back in 69, 70, somewhere in there. And certainly for the years and years before that, no action was brought against the Rangers. They were just a law unto themselves.
Ranger Alley and the Anglo Council were back in power. It was business as usual in Crystal City.
I never forgot those kinds of dynamics that go on, and from then on became vigilant that it's not just important to take power. You've got to be able to hold power and govern effectively. So I learned by watching.
Jose Angel Gutierrez went on to graduate school at St. Mary's University in San Antonio. There, he met Willie Velazquez. Before long, they were working together to bring change to Mexican-American politics.
We had a regular study circle. We'd read about King, and we'd go look for him. We traveled Atlanta several times. We'd read about Stokely Carmichael and the SNCC activists, and we'd track them down. We'd learn about Corky Gonzalez and Reyes Tigrina, and we'd go find them, or Chavez. I mean, we actually read and then went out and got informed firsthand.
Gutierrez wrote his thesis on the conditions for revolution in South Texas.
What he meant by revolution was fundamental change in electoral, economic, and social context. Remember, at this time in South Texas, Mexican Americans were legally barred in many ways from taking part in politics.
Early attempts to organize Mexican Americans began in the 19th century. Some successes came in 1929 with the formation of LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens.
LULAC was very much aware of the oppression which Mexican Americans were experiencing in South Texas.
Let me see. I think we need to do this. Oh, no. Okay. So I need some comments, after watching the video. Any comment that you think it's important to make? Megan, one comment.
I really thought it was interesting where they talked about it was 80, I think they said 80% made up Southern Texas. And I always knew that it was a large amount, obviously, because they were the indigenous there, but I didn't know that it was 80%.
Yeah, so yeah, it's important to have numbers because then you know actually what was the reality of the population, the situation actually in terms of numbers is crucial. It's not enough to say the population was significant. We need the numbers. So that's an important piece of information. Jorge, comment.
Well, it has different times, but they're doing the same to them as they were doing to the black people. So like they were doing everything possible to avoid them to vote and all that.
Yeah, I think the video is very good in showing us that there was a deep connection between these two communities because of what they were experiencing instead of exploitation. Let's say that word actually, because we don't say it very often, maybe, economic exploitation, labor intensive field work and little pay, for instance. So there could be, that common experience that will bring them together. But there was much more than that, right? Let's see if in the next comments we make more connections. Kaylee, thanks, Jorge. Kaylee?
Sorry, I wasn't working for a second.
So just one comment based on the video.
I also thought it was interesting that, like, what Megan said, that I think it was actually 95% of the population had like no political power because they were Mexican. And for the ranger to talk like how he went over and like these Mexicans were just like lying there, that was just like kind of shocking to see.
Yes, me too. Every time I see that image and that person taking it so lightly, and they were hanging, and that's a reference to lynching, and we can make a connection to the suffering on African Americans and the lynching that took place many times. So there's a connection between that history and the history of Mexican Americans in Texas. And yes, Kaylee, it's very important to mention then the Texas Rangers and what they were being used for, right? To repress the population, to make sure that they were not to be participating, say, as you mentioned in passing, in politics. Politics, that is, making decisions for the good, say, of the community, right? Key decisions that would shape the way the community would be living in that region of the country. Yes, Jimena, one comment.
I ended up finishing that video, the Chicanos video, and it had reference to let me see, like one of the schools, one of the young women wanted to join the cheerleading squad, but in that school it was only allowed one Mexican American per cheerleading squad. I think it was something like that, and they fought it. I loved how they had the bravery and the courage for all of the Mexican Americans in that school to just walk out that day. Mm-hmm. Because even if it seemed silly for a cheerleading squad position, it meant so much more, because it was the rights of human beings and the rights for the Mexican Americans. I just thought it's such bravery that they showed that day, for all of them to walk out and wreak havoc just by them walking out.
Yes, I think that's a great example that they present in the video. You all should take a look at that, because it's a very powerful, rather clear example of discrimination. Just because the girl was Mexican American, she couldn't be, I guess, part of the representative of the cheerleading team or captain. So it was a really, intense fight. Only some girls were to be in that kind of iconic role, but most of a good number, I don't know that, a significant number of students already were Mexican Americans. So how could you prevent them from attaining such positions? It's kind of equivalent to what we were watching just now, right? And the fight for political rights and political representation. Now, I was remembering this phrase, which is crucial for the United States, right? No taxation. Please finish the sentence. No taxation.
No representation.
Exactly, without representation. So here we have, yes, taxation, lots of it seems, and no representation. Come on, that's the basics, of American political life. No taxation without representation. Jeline, comment. So, I'm sorry, Jimena. So we need your comment, right? You watched the video already. You can write a beautiful comment and make a comment on Max's as well. Jaylene.
I thought it was interesting to see that there was a lot more issues within the Mexican culture and the Anglos. It's really interesting because during this time there was also like segregation between African Americans, but Mexicans, from my knowledge in school, I really wasn't taught about the segregation between Mexicans and like the Anglo. So that's like the fact that they were literally treated the same way as African Americans is very upsetting. And I like wish I knew more about this, but I'm like expanding my horizons, you know, now watching this. But that's my comment on the thing. Like I connected both of the cultures.
Yeah, one more thing in the video. Notice how the community has to organize itself and how they begin to do this. And we have people who will be taking leadership roles for the community, and they will be very clear as to we need to participate in politics. We need to send representatives, names. We need to vote. And as you know, let's think about, what is happening nowadays, because we are very close to, or maybe some people have already voted in the presidential elections and more. Notice how difficult it is, to reach out to people and to let them know that this is an important right, and that we need to somehow defend it and exercise it, right? Exercise it. And notice how difficult it was for them, for this community in Texas, to really just get to the polls because they were being prevented by at least 3 reasons from, voting, exercising their right. So yes, we do have, Jaylene, the segregation side, but I always want to highlight the other side as well, which is agency, meaning by that, we are going to exercise our rights. We are going to organize ourselves. We are going to have leaders. We are not just going to take this segregation or could we say alienation from public decisions, right? No, we are going to act and we're going to do something about it. So it's not only a suppression of your life, but also agency, meaning by that, again, we will do something, okay? We are going to do something. We are doing something. Here we go, and so on and so forth. Lindsay, any comment?
I found it very interesting how they treated the indigenous people of Texas very similar to the South. I did not know that was going to be what occurred. I've actually learned something new, that it wasn't just the Africans in the South, but also indigenous people of the South as well.
Okay, and something that is interesting, notice how in the video they showed the leaders, and that one of the Mexican-American men who was talking for the video said, once I got to college, I had to go and look for example, Martin Luther King. I think his name is Storky Carmichael, a very, important African-American leader at the time. And so when they're seeking after these tremendous speakers for the African-American community and learning from them and joining themselves, in the civil rights movement in the United States. And notice how without the civil rights movement and the participation, as Lindsay is highlighting here, the African-American community, the Mexican-American community, and many more, without this movement, then the enfranchising of people into politics, into decisions, I'm talking about the decisions for the community when I say politics, right? The key decisions for the community that will affect all lives, okay, as we know.
Did I word it correctly? I want to make sure I wasn't being offensive.
sometimes I have trouble with my wording.
You said indigenous, and I took that you were saying people who live in the region, and we were talking about Mexican Americans, just in case. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nothing to be sorry about. I'm just explaining my interpretation of what you were saying. And I thought you were trying to be respectful. Okay.
Yes,
Just
I'm
asking.
trying to be very respectful.
Yeah, that's what I understood.
All
So,
right.
yeah, but the point here is, you know, without this connection between leaders and youth that were already alert as to the need of learning from those, you know, who are inspiring the country, who are inspiring much more than the African-American community, you know. Without that learning, we are not going to advance. We are not going to gain more, what is it? Power. In the end, you know, bottom line, power, political power, economical power, cultural power. It's just the basics in the end, right? You have less, you have more, you fight for it through the democratic system, right? Through the system in place, but the system has to allow for everybody to participate and so on and so forth. So notice without this youth, right? These youngsters that will start organizing in the 60s, we don't have the, what is it? Kind of the renewal of the Mexican community, because prior to that, we have a different approach, and they were beginning to mention one important organization for Mexican Americans, which was LULAC. So also, along with people, we have organizations, and without organizations, we don't have, you know, the success, the push forward for the interest of the communities. Okay, so once we talk about heritage, you know, our heritage, say Irish American, Italian American, Mexican American, Puerto Rican Americans. What do we know about institutions? What do we know about organizations? What do we know about leaders? Many times we mention names, right? But we forget about organizations that might have been important to structure the possibility for expanding participation in American society, expanding the sharing of the pie, okay? The proverbial American pie needs to be shared, or will be excluding people from sharing in the goods of the pie, okay, or the American pie. So that's important for our class to really begin to understand, you know, this is the tip of the iceberg, begin to understand the experiences of Mexican Americans. So, task, watch the video. What Jimena was saying about that example in high school is crucial for you to understand the experiences of these youngsters in the 60s, during the 60s, specifically Mexican American youth, very young people at the time, okay, and their parents. And as Jimena was, I think, suggesting, what took place within the community and among parents and their reaction to what was happening to their children. This is the way politics behaves, you know, in the end. If parents do not get upset about what's happening to their children, nothing will happen. So yeah, the children experience something, but you know, it's my blood, it's my flesh and blood. So you touch them, I'm going to react big time, right? But for today, our conversation needs to be centering around Huinger of Memory. And the person who wrote this book is, as you know, Richard Rodriguez. He was born on July 31st, 1944. So 1944, which means that in 54, he was 10 years old. In 64, he was 20 years old. So this is a person who was receptive then to that movement, who was somehow very close, right, embedded in the 60s situation. He was conscious about the civil rights movement and also about the Chicano movement, coming from that community, actually, because his parents were Mexican immigrants to the States, and Richard Rodriguez was born in the States. Okay, he was born in the States. It's interesting to think about the title of the book, you know, Huinger of Memory. I never thought too much about that idea of hunger and memory coming together in the title. Hunger of memory, the need to get to know yourself and your past, right? Somehow, but he seems to be hungry for the past, for what took place. It's almost like saying, I have an obsession with my past and what happened to me. Mostly, I guess, is for this autobiography, is I need to know what took place when I was a very little boy, and when I was getting to be conscious of my surroundings. And then quickly he goes, you know, about being a teenager, and then an adult, and going back to his family and exploring how he was relating to his parents and family, and so on and so forth. If you, I said to you, this is a kind of heads up, okay? Heads up. I said to you that you may have a different edition to mine, so we may have a complication with the pages. So let's help each other throughout these conversations to identify the pages, since it's going to be a bit complicated, okay? You please help me out whenever I'm just referring to a page, you may have a different page number. But there's a dedication for the book. I'm not going to read it, but I do want to highlight the end of the dedication, okay? Because he says, at the end of the dedication, he says, for her and for him to honor them. For her and for him to honor them. What he's saying here is, I'm dedicating this book to my mom and to my dad, to honor them, to honor both of them, my Mexican parents who immigrated to the United States. So it's paying homage to both of them. And then we have the prologue. Let me ask you a radical question, okay? The radical question is, you read the prologue. What was most challenging for you to understand? If you have a question, what is your question? You were reading, you know, and then there was something that you get stuck into because I couldn't make sense. Anything that did not make sense to you, I would appreciate. So, because then we can explain it, right? So I need for you to tell me about something that did not make sense to you. Clearly, you know, clearly did not make sense. Jaylene.
Well, on my part, I kind of understood most of it just because in a class that I had taken with you, we had briefed about this. So I kind of knew going into this, it was going to be hard. So I did take my time, but I also understand it's like he describes himself as a socially advantaged child. And it took him like 30 years to feel like assimilated, to feel like finally accepted within like where he is. And I guess that's very common with like Mexican American kids because they find it hard to assimilate, I guess, or just figure out their identities for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to get ahead of myself if if people aren't understanding, you know what I mean?
Yes, but I have a challenge for you, since you said that you understood it. What does pastoral mean? There is a whole page
related to the church.
There is a whole page, page 6 in my case, okay, in my book. If I count the pages, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, starting from the beginning of the prologue.
Yeah, because he's referring to it because it's a collection, and like the pastoral, it means like a, like, I guess it's a change. Because like, if you talk about it in an actual sense, it's referring to like, you know, kind of like sheep. Isn't that what that means? Like the word pastoral is like kind of a collection of things.
No.
No, I thought it was a collection of things, like, because it's a collection of writings, so I figured that's what it would be too.
Collection of writings.
Yeah, it's a collection of like, well, since he is saying it's like multiple essays throughout his life.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be like a collection of writings?
That's
No?
correct. That's correct. But that doesn't necessarily have to do with the word pastoral. No. No. This is coming from his English studies, because he was an English major, and he became, I'm sorry, he went to study a master's degree also, and his field was always English studies, English literature to be more precise. It was English literature, meaning by that, all the British guys, you know, and many American writers, but British also, okay? In the sense that the British literature is kind of the basis for the American literary tradition, okay, in that regard. So I still have the question about pastoral, okay? Pastoral. I don't necessarily want us to answer, but I just want to formulate the questions, okay? Let's see what are the questions. Because this is Jaylene, this is a very important question for the prologue, okay? This is a very important question for the prologue. It's not a minor word. Yeah, it is a little literary genre. Yes, it is. So that's a good answer. That's an excellent answer. Literary genre. That's what it is. And I know it because in Spanish, we also have that kind of tradition coming from Spain. So it's some kind of literature coming from the Renaissance, okay? The Renaissance, yes. But the second and most important question is, why is he using this word here, you know, to begin the book? In what sense is using it? I'm not asking you to answer it. I'm just asking the question so that you realize this is important for the chapter, okay? So I really need your doubts, you know, to be expressed, your questions. Megan, do you have a question also? There was something unclear about this. Anything unclear?
I didn't find it too confusing, but I guess I had some questions maybe about like his upbringing,
okay.
Where I understand obviously they are Mexican Americans, but he talks about how he was like used to being around rich children, and it made me like kind of wonder about like, was that just in schooling? Was that because he went to a good college, or did he just have like friends growing up that were rich? Which kind of made me wonder, because they talked about like the separation between like the group. So I was just wondering kind of maybe about that.
Yeah. You said a social disadvantage. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Socially disadvantaged child boy. Yeah, that's very important in terms of the whole, you know, autobiography. One basic question one could ask is this one: why is a person going to write an autobiography? Why would one, you know, like to write an autobiography? What would be a reason, do you think, Lindsay?
Well, if someone wants to write a biography, they want to, in my opinion, they would want to inspire or influence others. Because if you write a autobiography of yourself, you can also show that other people can do it too and follow in like your footsteps, maybe become a role model. Or maybe in the political sense that if they join the same group or organization as the author did, maybe that could add more power to that group.
Yeah, that's an excellent answer, I would say. Yes.
Because I don't have good understanding of politics, but that's the best I could explain it.
Yes, thanks a lot. Do you all know of any autobiography? Somebody who wrote an important autobiography? Could you mention a writer?
Helen Keller?
Who was she?
I know she was, I don't remember where she's from, but she was blind, deaf, and was that all? I think she was blind and deaf. I know that for a fact. And she overcame the fact that she couldn't do much, and lived a relatively normal life. Wrote about autobiography.
Actually, Anne Sullivan helped her learn objects around her by touching, like water, and she would use sign language to, she would feel the hands, and then she learned sign language to communicate with those who couldn't understand her, because probably it would be very frustrating. I remember watching a movie, I cannot remember what it's called, but it was about Anne Sullivan and Helen Keller's relationship and how she had helped improve Helen Keller's life. That even though if you're deaf or blind, you can't see or hear, which are very important senses, you can still function in society and function as a human being.
Yes, very important. And to address one of your comments, Lindsay, so she was not only writing for people who were experiencing the same kind of life, she was also writing for the majority, if you will, those who are able, right? They were able, and therefore they could, through that message that she's sending out, understand better in more detail the way she was looking at life, going through life, and appreciating somehow I guess the significance of what she was doing and the beauty of what she was doing. Okay, Megan was also including important names in the chat. She says, Anne Frank, Nelson Mandela. And Megan, I didn't know that Hemingway had written, Ernest Hemingway, the American writer, and had written an autobiography. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I had like read some parts of it from a different class.
Oh, great. Okay, I didn't know that. That's interesting to me. Very interesting. Well, and I wanted to also mention, for instance, Barack Obama, because Barack Obama wrote, an important book about his dad, his African.
Wasn't Anne Frank's, I'm not sure if Anne Frank was an autobiography. I could be wrong, because wasn't that a collection of her diary she got on her 13th birthday?
Yeah, but I think it still classifies because she's writing about her life and then it was published. So, like in my other lit classes, we classified that as an autobiography, but I'm not. It might not be like. It was
Okay, but then that's interesting too. That conversation that you both are having regarding the genre is interesting because the genre borderlines may shift, right? They may, depending on how you approach it, you may classify it this way or that way, depending on what your say, theoretical approach to a specific genre is like, or how you define it. Okay.
I'd say it's like a personal thing.
Mhm.
I mean, it's basically writing down her personal thoughts. I'm not sure if she was thinking about it being published because she was killed before her father. I'm pretty sure her father survived, and I think he decided to publish her diary in
Yes.
her memory.
Yes, the answer to that briefly, because it's not part of our conversation today, but that's interesting, is that yes, she was writing it in that fashion, but somebody assembled the collection and it can be looked at, right, as the description of a life under duress, under extremity, right, extreme circumstances. But I want to bring the session back to my first question. You already were giving interesting answers, okay, to important segments of the prologue, and that will play also an important role throughout the whole piece, the whole book. But what I wanted to bring back the class to was my first question, which is, what are the challenges? Okay, what are the challenges? Let me give you one. The beginning of the prologue, we have this word, Caliban. And this is the sentence. It's the very first sentence. I have taken Caliban's advice. So my first question to you would be, or to us would be, who the heck is Caliban? And why is he taking an advice from this person, Caliban? Okay, that's my first question. Then second sentence. I'm just going over the second sentence, okay? I have stolen their books. This is totally surprising to me. So he's stealing books. This must be a metaphor. It's not, this guy is not a robber, thief stealing books from people, Richard Rodriguez. But secondly, their books, whose books? Their books. And then notice the first sentence. I will have some run of this island. What island? What island are we talking about? So first question, Caliban. Second question, who are they? Their books. Third question, island. What island is he talking about? Give me three answers. If this is clear. If this is crystal clear, tell me what are the answers. So that's what I meant by challenges, okay? That's what I meant by challenges. That there might be something obscure about the prologue that we need to decipher, actually, okay? Well, well, this is important to answer at the beginning. The key here is that he was has been a very good student of English literature. And here he starts the book referring to an important writer for the English tradition, William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare wrote a piece, I think it was his last play, correct me if I'm wrong, and that play is called The Tempest. The Tempest. And Caliban is one of the characters of that play, The Tempest. Caliban used to live on his own island until European people come to the island. And one of them is Prospero. So he was initially, the part of the indigenous population of the island, and then come the Europeans, and then now he has got to fight the Europeans. So notice the Tempest display is a play about the connection, the initial connection between the European coming to the Americas and the population of the Americas, or something like that. Now, Caliban, it's black. Caliban is black. So when Richard Rodriguez is saying, I have taken Caliban's advice, now we have two meanings. One, I've taken the advice of the black person. Secondly, I've taken the advice of the person who was here. I have stolen their books. Well, the only interpretation I have about who are these people, right? With the books that I need to steal, the Europeans, the European knowledge. I will have some run of this island. Well, he's positioning himself in the role of Caliban. And he's saying, because to me, he's saying, because I have the expertise, because I have the knowledge, this guy, this little Mexican-American boy, okay, this me Mexican, this me brown, this person right here, I have attained knowledge. I know the books. I've read them. Now I can shape my life in American society. The island for me is American society. American society. So it's interesting because he's saying, you know, yeah, I know the books. I have read my Shakespeare. I have read my poets. I have read my philosophers. But at the same time, it's interesting to me that he's saying, I've taken Caliban's advice. So I'm associating myself with, you know, this side of the story, this side of the clash of civilizations. I'm associating myself with the viewpoint of Caliban. Okay. Now, do you know what an anagram is? What does the word anagram mean, Jorge? Do you know that? Anagram?
No.
Anybody? Because let me tell you why I'm asking the question. Because Caliban is an anagram. Caliban is an anagram. A-N-N-A-G.
An anagram is a word, and they can use letters from that word to spell another word.
Exactly. That's what it is. So with the same letters, you can spell a different word. And this is like a magic trick, okay, almost, if you believe in magic. Yes, so what is the word that we have, that we can make up, placing the letters of Caliban in a different order? Take a look at the word. What is the word? What Shakespeare did was to use an anagram. Nobody can guess what it is? No one can figure it out? Caliban?
Does it refer to the Caribbean people?
Yes.
The Carib. Okay.
Yes, it does. But we need the word. You know, there's one word specifically that you can make up with this one, Caliban. I know you know it. This is fun. Nobody? I'm going to have to say it. That's boring.
Can you give us a hint?
Yes. The word will begin with C and A. I'll give you one more, but this is like giving it away, okay? C-A-N. C-A-N. No? Okay, here we go. I'll have to say it. Cannibal.
Oh,
I was gonna say that, but I didn't know if it was right.
Oh, come on, you should have said it. Cannibal. Now, I have a second question, of course. So, Kaylee, what does cannibal mean?
Cannibal?
Hmm? Cannibal.
Um,
What does that mean?
I am honestly not sure.
Okay.
When I think of that word, I think of like jumping into a pool, but no, that's not right.
Okay.
No, it doesn't. Cannibal like
Cannibal. Oh
Yeah,
wait, sorry.
I know
He's a cannibal.
Oh, Jimena, go ahead.
it's someone who it's a person or individual who basically eats other people.
Yummy.
or it could be an animal too that eats the same class or group,
Okay.
like birds.
Oh, yes, you're right. And we have even an ing word, right? Cannibalizing. Cannibalizing. That you can use. I've seen it in essays. Okay, cannibalizing. Yes. So the anagram is important because what was the way Europeans were looking at the indigenous population of the Caribbean, as Jaylene was mentioning, cannibals.
Does that explain why in the old cartoons they would portray indigenous people of islands or the Caribbean as these cannibals, and like in those Bug Bunny cartoons, put people in the pot and they had bones tied to them, and
There
they
you
would
go. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. I think so.
that did, or
Yeah, I think so.
because cartoons were also used in a political sense too.
I totally agree with you. I cannot agree more.
Even today, they are kind of used in political sense, sort of.
Yeah, and since there was no movies, right? They were published in newspapers, and that was a way to summarize somehow the perspective of the maybe some kind of majority, if you will, or people in power, and how they were viewing, different people. Yes, indeed, indeed. It was a tool, I would say. It was a tool, a cultural tool to describe people who were different from those in power. I would put it that way. Now, what I mean to say by this connection between the Caliban word and cannibal now is that this was the fear of the other. This expresses, the strong fear and the rejection of the other as a cannibal. They will eat me up. If I associate with them, right, they will eat me up. So therefore, I will no longer be. I will no longer be. And here we go. It's the phobia, okay? It's the phobia, homophobia, and so on and so on. So it's the fear of the other and what that other can do to me because he's so freaky, so different, so out there that I just cannot conceive this relationship unless I conceive it as domination, because it's such a beast that we are talking about, right? The other is such a beast that unless we put them on chains, we cannot control them. We need to control them because they have these drives, right? These drives, psychological drives that will lead them to the devastation of civilization as we know it. Talk about zombies or something like that, right? To make it more contemporary, if you will. So this is it has to do completely with the fear of the European, okay? And so Shakespeare was using this character precisely to portray that. But notice how from just 3 sentences in the beginning, right? We get complexity, and that's what I was trying to say. This guy, Richard Rodriguez, is trying to embed in here lots of ideas just by writing shortly about them. If you don't get them, you're lost. And that's what I think that the beginning is challenging, okay? But not necessarily everything that he writes, but from time to time, he will be obscure unless you know the reference, okay? What he's referring to. For instance, he says later on that he was a socially disadvantaged child, but notice how he puts that, you know, between quotation marks. So is he ascribing to the description that people gave to him, disadvantaged, socially disadvantaged, or is he criticizing that, questioning from the beginning? And also, he says this is going to be important, so we need to stop and kind of talk about this phrase. And the second paragraph, an extreme public alienation. He says, an enchantedly happy child, right? Mine was a childhood of intense family closeness. Cool, okay, we can understand that. And then he goes and says, an extreme public alienation. So I was always with my family, you know, we had a good time, we were very close, we loved each other, but notice at the same time, he says, extreme public alienation. And he will repeat this word. So I want to help you out to you know, to make sense out of the word as he repeats it in different chapters. I need your help here. I need you to tell me, what does alienation mean to you? Alienation. Lynn, no, I'm gonna say, Jaylin, alienation.
Like, separating yourself, distancing yourself from others.
Yes, I agree with that. Anything else, anybody?
Kind of like isolated almost.
Synonym, okay, isolation, yes. And so how, because one question that is important to Richard Rodriguez is, one, how does a person attain a public voice? So if he says public voice, notice he's talking about private voice. So how do we participate in society, basically? Well, we're talking about isolation, and he's saying extreme public alienation, right? Public, so it was dissociated from, say, the majority or the community, okay? Because of my beginning. Yes, there was a lot of love and affection, but there was something there that was separating me from the community at large, public alienation. So this is one important theme throughout his autobiography, okay? Then we get to skin coloration. Notice, dark-skinned, and then to be seen at the Belgravia, I guess, dinner party, or in New York, exotic in a tuxedo. My face is drawn to severe Indian features, which would pass notice on the page of a National Geographic, because they always, I guess, they put them in these exotic faces on the cover of the magazine, maybe. But at a cocktail party in Bel Air, somebody wonders, have you ever thought of doing any high fashion modeling? Take this card. And notice the strange parenthesis that comes after. But I hope you now can make sense out of the parenthesis. He writes, in Beverly Hills, will this monster make a man? For me, Beverly Hills is like the fancy side, a location where, you know, the beautiful people go, the elite people go, the wealthy people go. So he's asking, in Beverly Hills, will this monster make a man? Why is he saying, let me see if you understood, if you're making the connections. Why do you think he's saying monster here?
Because Hollywood and or Beverly Hills, sometimes wealth can change a person. Sometimes it could lead to them thinking they're better than everyone else and change their lives and their attitudes and change relationships. Or sometimes it could lead to a downfall of a celebrity, like I can't remember his name, but he was an actor from Disney, and he was in Peter Pan, the voice of Peter Pan. And what happened was, as he got older, he had acne, and they fired him. They went into drugs, and then he overdosed, and he was only 31. And he's buried in a pauper's grave on Hart Island, where there are unmarked graves. So basically, he died without his family knowing, and not even buried with his family. But in short term, it can change a person or it can lead to their downfall. Because sometimes paparazzi and how people, it's like you're focusing on how people view you and how it pressures someone to just, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. And
yeah, I don't think, yeah, I think that's accurate. But I would like to ask you a more precise question, maybe. How would you connect this? Will this monster make a man to something that he said before? What is the connection to something that he said before, Kaylee?
The cannibal.
Yes. In what sense?
That their monsters are portrayed as like these crazy people, and yeah.
Yeah, I'm Mexican American. How are they going to look at me? If not, yeah, if not as Caliban, right? Caliban. Will they look at me? That's the idea, that Caliban is a monster, okay? That because I'm different, right, I will not be accepted, even tolerated. No, I'll be seen in this fashion. But let me see. What I find interesting also is that he's saying that he's Belgravia, he's at this party, right, in this fancy location, and they see him as exotic, and at the same time, he highlights the Indian features in his face, and then we have a person who asks him, have you ever thought of doing any high fashion modeling? Take this card. For me, what he's saying is that, notice, if I include myself in this environment, people would not look at me or categorize me as somebody who does not belong in here. This is his point, one of his major points for the book, okay? On the contrary, they will not see me as the monster. They will see me as yes, as somebody exotic, but at the same time, who can be, you know, part of high fashion. So something is happening here from the beginning of the autobiography, okay? And this has to do with social class for me, social class. I am part of the environment, I am within the environment. Notice how people look at me. For me, Richard Rodriguez is saying, it doesn't mean that we need to agree with him, okay? But I'm just telling you, this is the way he's presenting himself to us, okay? Then he says, I was a child of classmates with rich parents, So I'm kind of used to being around people who are wealthy rather than people who are poor. Notice what he's saying. Because I went to school with them. Maybe I went to college with them. Wealthy people. Social class issues, okay? Social class. And then notice how on page 5, he starts talking about what I need to disclose against Chicanos, okay? Page 5 in my book is where you have this paragraph. There are those in white America who would anoint me to play out for them some drama of ancestral reconciliation. Do you know what page is that for your book? This is the paragraph. There are those in white America who would anoint me to play out for them some drama of ancestral reconciliation. Are you there? Anybody?
Mine is on page 3. I have the
Okay.
darker black book
Yeah,
on.
so it's page 3 for you. Notice page 5 for me, 3 for you. And notice what he says right away. Perhaps because I'm marked by indelible color person, they easily suppose that I'm unchanged by social mobility, that I can claim unbroken ties with my past. Notice what he's saying. I've moved on. Okay, just because of my color, that doesn't mean that social mobility, attaining a different social status, will not change me, a Mexican American person. No, it will. It will. I no longer need to claim, an association with what Chicanos are saying. Let me be brutal here, okay? I'm being very brutal in my interpretation, just disclosing to you what he's saying, okay? That's Chicanos. Chicanos need to be talking always about, in some kind of fashion about ancestry. That's not the way I'm going to go about this. Why? Because my life has changed me, okay? At a time when many middle-class children and parents grow distant, apart, no longer speak, romantic solutions, like the Chicano solutions to ancestry, appeal to some people within the community, not to me. But I reject the role that Chicanos would like to impose on me, okay? And maybe some liberal white Americans as well. And then there is this intriguing parenthesis that refers to the same. Down the page, this is what matters to me, the story of the scholarship boy. So we need to find out what does he mean by a scholarship boy, who returns home one summer from college to discover bewildering silence facing his parents. This is my story, an American story. I return home and then silence. Something took place. What about closeness? What about affection? What about communication? Something took place for him, the way he will narrate his life. Montaigne, Shakespeare, Lawrence, these are main important writers in the British and European tradition. Montaigne is French, of course. They are mine now. My books, the books, I have the books, I have their books, okay? I have the knowledge, I have the expertise. Next page for me, I write this autobiography as the history of my schooling. So he'll be talking a lot about, his education, where he went to school, what took place as he was receiving this education. To admit the change in my life, I must speak of years as a student, of losses, of gains. Losses of gain and gains, both at the same time, not just gains, right? Losing something, gaining something, losing for him. And then I consider my book a kind of pastoral. Let me finish here at least with a mention to what he says, because it's complicated, I think. He wants to write about the poor, because he's coming from the working class background. How is he going to write about it? He says, I am middle class now, and I can write as a Mexican American person from this social status, middle class person, American person. How does one do that? How does one do, what is it? How does one show respect to the Mexican American poor and doesn't trivialize their experience? You know, in the British tradition, pastoral tradition, those in power, those with money, used to write poetry, pastoral poetry about the poor, farmers, people working in the fields. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm just an American middle class Mexican American person. How do I do it? Not to, you know, break the truthful relationship that I have to my people, to my community. And that's what he was saying about, you know, this idea of pastoral writing, or the use or utilization of this tradition for writing somehow his autobiography. In a nutshell, that's what he said. So I'll see you Thursday. I took one more minute of your life. I'm sorry, I wanted to close the chapter for today. Next time we talk about the first part of the book area, right? That's the word. So please read the chapter, participate in the forum. I'll see you next class. Thanks.